The member from Thornhill.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And my question is for the Premier. For years, Premier, you have stood in this House and acknowledged that business tax cuts create jobs and are good for the economy. Yet you've decided to hike taxes on the very people who Ontario depends on to get us out of this recession, job creators. Premier, will you today do the right thing and vote with the Ontario PC caucus to stop your tax hike on job creators?
Premier.
Speak with the Minister of Finance.
Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the member is right. We have, in fact, cut corporate taxes quite dramatically. We've eliminated the capital tax, Mr. Speaker, and they voted against all those tax cuts, Mr. Speaker. We've taken the general corporate rate from 14 to 11.5, the manufacturing process from 12 to 10. And I remember the last Conservative budget here in Ontario when the then Minister of Finance raised corporate taxes, Mr. Speaker. So we will look at this in the context of the entire budget and make the right choices that are balanced for all Ontarians, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary.
I find it amazing that the Finance Minister congratulates his government for the great job that they're doing when their own economist says that the deficit is going to $30 billion by 2017-18. You have spent months dodging even the most basic questions about business tax cuts. And in that time, Ontario has lost far too many businesses that have moved out of our province to create jobs somewhere else. You cannot dodge much longer. Later today, you will finally have to put your money, as it were, where your mouth is. Business leaders everywhere will be interested in seeing if you really will take the disastrous step of raising taxes on Ontario businesses. Minister, will you actually be at the vote this afternoon? Will the Premier be there, or are you both too embarrassed at your climb down on business taxes to even show up?
Minister.
I'd like to read from Hansard a quote from Janet Ecker, the then Conservative Finance Minister, dated June 17, 2002. And I know you were there, you were there, you were there, you were there, and you were there. Here's what she said. In the meantime, because of our short-term fiscal situation, I will introduce legislation to delay the current planned reductions in personal and corporate income taxes and the next step of the equity and education tax credit, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have to make a variety of choices to continue to build on this great province's future. It's about good education. It's about good health care. It's about a competitive tax system, which we have now, Mr. Speaker. We welcome their bluster. We want to hear their motion. I know our members will cast their votes. Free to vote, Mr. Speaker, the way they choose. They will make those choices. We're proud of our members and proud of this great province.
Too bad you're not proud of Canada.
Great speech-making, Minister, but I could spend all day reminding you of your own commitment to cut taxes, to create jobs, another commitment you are backtracking on. Since I don't have all day, we will save discussing your complete reversal for the next election campaign when, thanks to your tax hikes on job creators, we will no doubt still be in a jobs crisis. Minister, you may not have any intention of running in the next election, or you might even want to be leader in the next election. We don't know what your Premier is going to do. But some of the folks on that side of the House are going to be there. How are they going to look at their local business leaders in the face after you, once again, have turned your back on the small business community?
Thank you. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, they'll look at the small business community and say, we cut your taxes, we made your environment more competitive, and my Conservative opponent voted against that, Mr. Speaker. That's what they'll say. They'll speak of integrity. They'll ask whether or not full-day learning should be a priority over the horse racing industry, Mr. Speaker. They'll ask whether or not corporate tax cuts, when we now have a low and competitive rate, should have greater importance than
Bring it down, please.
Mr. Speaker, they will ask why that party would see further corporate tax cuts as a priority over class size. Those are important priorities, Mr. Speaker. That's what the budget process is about. We're being clear with our priorities. They're saying corporate tax cuts are more important than education. We simply don't share that point of view, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Back to the Premier, Speaker. Premier, the NDP have been wrong on business tax cuts ever since there was a business to tax. While the Ontario PC caucus disagrees with the NDP on that, we at least respect the NDP for being principled. That same thing cannot be said about your government. You and your government have a track record as reliable as the sunrise of breaking promises and backing away from your commitments. Premier, you have a chance to break that pattern today. The question is, will you? Will you do what is right? Will you keep your commitment and vote with the Ontario PC caucus to reduce taxes on job creators?
Minister.
Minister of Finance.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the member opposite thought that his own finance minister lacked principles when she made the choices she made. And that was the first budget after the Taxpayer Protection Act, Mr. Speaker, which they put into place, and then the first thing they do, Mr. Speaker, is vote against their own legislation. I thought that was a principled stand at a difficult time, Mr. Speaker. I regret that you would accuse your colleagues in your own caucus, your former finance minister, your former Premier, of being unprincipled, Mr. Speaker. I think they are principled people. I disagreed with them on many issues. It's a shame that they tie principle and integrity into this debate. Principle and integrity is very important in public policy, and it's very important in politics, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary.
This finance minister talks about principle while this province sustains an unemployment rate of 8.1%. You spent the last election campaign attacking the NDP as job killers and incompetent on the economy, but if you vote against the Ontario PC motion today, you yourself will kill more jobs and prove yourself incompetent on the economy. You will lose what little credibility you had left with business leaders in Ontario. Perhaps it's time for a new finance minister, and maybe you can take the health minister with you. Go home with a shred of integrity intact. Vote for the Ontario PC motion today. I ask you again, will you commit to doing that?
Thank you. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to quote from one Jim Flaherty in 2003. And I know members opposite have a lot of connections with Mr. Flaherty. Here's what he said in response to when the Tories delayed their planned tax cut. The delay was created by a financial downturn related to extraordinary circumstances, Mr. Speaker. I think Mr. Flaherty has principle and integrity. I think your colleagues here have principle and integrity. I may not agree with them. I think principle and integrity are important to politics, Mr. Speaker, and I can assure you, not only am I staying here and the Minister of Health, we're going to fight for a better Ontario for our kids and for the rest of the people of this great province.
Seated, please. Seated, please. Stop the clock. Be seated. Final supplementary.
Concerned, they've just given a round of applause to a finance minister who has presided over a deficit that's larger than all other provinces combined. Ontarians elected 16 new Ontario PC caucus members. Ontarians want us to fight for the jobs that are fleeing this province. We are going to spend each and every day of this legislature doing exactly that. If you hike taxes on job creators, Ontarians will not let you forget it. We on this side of the House will not let you forget it. Every time a business closes its door, we will remind you. Every day Ontario falls further behind the rest of Canada, we will remind you. And every day of the next election campaign, we will remind you. It is not too late. Premier, Finance Minister, will you do what's right? Will you vote with us today?
Minister. Seated, please. Seated, please. Thank you. Minister.
It's one government in Canada that has a larger deficit in Ontario. That's the federal Conservative government in Ottawa, Mr. Speaker. And we worked with them, Mr. Speaker. We worked with them to stimulate the economy. The members opposite want to laugh. I don't think it's a laughing matter, any more than I think that the tactics of the president of the PC party with respect to Irwin Cotler are a laughing matter, Mr. Speaker. And if you want to speak to integrity and principle in politics, Mr. Speaker, I wonder, given what the Speaker said about those tactics, here's what the Speaker of the Federal House said: attempting to sow confusion in the minds of voters as to whether or not their member is about to resign is a reprehensible tactic. Mr. Speaker, let's hear what they have to say about integrity in politics, Mr. Speaker. Let's find out where they really stand on integrity.
Thank you. Good question. The Leader of the Third Party.